Yes, cold calling sucks. It's challenging, and that's exactly why it works so well. If you're doing practices from 1972, well, you're probably not going to see the results you want. On today's episode, however, we're going to tell you exactly why cold calling sucks and why cold calling does work so well. It's because it sucks. Man, this is good. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, I have the one and only Nick and Armand on the podcast. They're both the hosts over at 30 Minutes to President Club, and they just wrote an amazing book all around cold calling. They break things down tactically. They have sound bites with QR codes. You just scan the QR codes in the book and go listen to the sound bites with the tactics and the strategies they're sharing. It's very actionable. And when I got them on this episode, you're going to hear how they just kept going back and forth with just so many great insights, breaking down cold call, some of the mistakes that we're making, why it's challenging for most sales reps, and what you can use, what you should be doing in order to be successful with your cold call. So if you're looking to improve your cold calling game, this is a must, and I want you to go ahead and save it. You can also check out their podcast, 30 Minutes President Club. We have details down in the show notes and access to their books. If this is your first time listening to our show, we want to make sure that you leave with some insights to help you build top of funnel, as well as help you to improve your close rate. As we dive in today, listen to some of these principles, see how you can apply them in your sales efforts, and don't just listen and pass it on and move on to the next one. Just listen, go back again, and take the principles and actually apply them. I know you're going to see great success. Check it out. Armand, Nick, pleasure to have you guys here.
We made it. The one and only Donald Kelly. It's a pleasure to be here with you, my man.
Shoot, man. Well, I'm excited. You guys are a pretty dope podcast. I'll chat about that for a little bit, and we put a link down below so folks can get access to it, and all the fun stuff you guys are doing with that. And how long you guys been podcasting now? It's been 4 or 5 years altogether?
Gosh, we started in 2020, but Armand and I have known each other for a very, very long time. We've started a couple businesses together, some that have done well, some that have taught us a lot, and that's the price of tuition. But a lot of it informs the stuff that we talk about and teach and believe about selling today.
And I think that's what makes it so unique, because not only with your business, you actually did the stuff as contributors as well as leaders, plus with the content you've developed, and you have a premise that you came up with that led to the creation of a book, right?
Yeah, it is. So we have a book coming out called Cold Calling Sucks, and that's why it works. And the whole sort of philosophy around it is we actually pulled some data on we were trying to figure out, we wanted to write a book on cold calling because Armand and I have both had a lot of experience cold calling, and it's been meaningful for us. But before you write a book on cold calling, you got to figure out is it actually effective, or was this just an experience that he and I had in niche spaces? And so we actually partnered with Gong, and we pulled data from 300 million cold calls. And what we saw was for the 50th percentile seller, it's actually not very good. They make something like 800 dials. They talk to 43 people. Their connect rate isn't great. And they end up booking 2 meetings off of 800 dials, which is basically calling every single day for a month straight. But the best salespeople, actually not even the best, the top quartile salespeople, they make those same 800 dials. They actually connect with double the number of prospects because they do things like they call their numbers. They're a bit more strategic about how they're dialing. And they end up booking something like 18 or 19 meetings off of this same number of dials. And
that's crazy. Hold on, 18 or 19 over 2. That's a huge difference.
Correct. And so the reality is, no matter how good you get at cold calling, it's going to be painful and uncomfortable and awkward. You're going to deal with rude prospects and gatekeepers that shut you down, and you're going to hit voicemail a lot. But for an hour of work a day, there's pretty much no other way to generate real pipeline results like that than cold calling. And so the premise of the book is, hey, no matter what, it's going to suck. But that's actually why it works, because so many people never get to that top 75th percentile because they give up because of how challenging it is. And if it seems wow, that's kind of hard though to get to the top 75th percentile, the other thing to realize, Donald, is the bar is set very, very low. And so to get good really just requires you to get a couple things right, which hopefully we can share some examples today of some of the ways you can set yourself apart from the average telemarketer.
Dang, this is good. Well, if you're just listening to this episode, I mean, you got the cost of admission is already there. You already got so many good insights already. That's going to help you. But specifically, we want to get into some of these things. There are a few things that we started talking about. One was the opener, 2, the objection, and then 3, you have a really unique idea on the value proposition. So let's dive into all 3 of those and just take one at a time. We can break them down. I'm talking about the opener right now because you gave us some idea and about the connect rate, and I'm sure in the book, again, there's a lot more ideas on how we can do that better. But specifically with the opener, so many people get frozen at that point. It's kind of like a dog chasing a car, right? What do you do when you actually catch the car? How do we open this thing, right? I've been making $800 and I got somebody like, what works? What should I be thinking about?
Yeah, it's funny when you almost get surprised when someone picks up the phone. And I think the unfortunate reality, Donald, is what most salespeople do is they greet people on a cold call the same way that they greet all of these other people in their life, which is, hey, how's your day going? Or, hey, did I catch you at a bad time? And the problem is when you lead with an opener like, hey, it's Armand from Northwestern. How's your day going? The prospect knows that you're a stranger and they know that you don't actually care how their day is going. So you'll be met with an exasperated sigh that sounds like, fine, how can I help you? And that's code word for, I know you're a salesperson. What are you trying to sell me? The other oftentimes thing that will happen is people will say, did I catch you at a bad time? Which it's always a bad time. It's a cold call. I've literally heard people say, yes, it's a bad time, hang up, block your number, and now you never get to see that prospect again. And on top of that, it puts you in a position of inferiority. Those are the traditional bad canned cold call openers. But Donald, there are some better canned cold call openers that I still don't think are great. Another good example is the permission-based opener, which is, Donald, I know you weren't expecting my call. I have 30 seconds to tell you why I called, and then you can tell me whether or not it's fit. That worked really, really well a couple years ago. The problem is everyone's using that one now too. And so they're getting lumped in with the telemarketers as well. And so what Nick and I have resolved to do is the only way that you can truly break the telemarketer perception is to pick up the phone and lead with an opener that cannot be canned. And the only thing that cannot be canned is if I lead with something about you. So you want to lead with context. So the first opener that I'll give you is what's called the heard the name tossed around opener. And it sounds like this. Donald, if I was calling you, what I want to do is I want to take someone you respect, an industry peer, maybe a competitor, or maybe someone that you've done business with before. Maybe we share a mutual investor. And I'm going to lead with that up front. So I might say, hey, Donald, we work with a few other sales podcasts out there, folks like 30 Minutes to President's Club. It's Armand from Podcast Inc. Have you heard a name tossed around? What I'm doing is I know you run the Sales Evangelist podcast. And so I'm going to name an industry peer, the 30 Minutes to President's Club podcast. And if you know they work with the guys at 30 MPC, you're going to be like, even if you haven't heard of Podcast Inc., you're going to be like, no, but I'm not going to shit on you because I know you guys work with Armand and Nick. I guess what's this call about? So when you lead with context about how you know a peer in their space, you completely change the tenor and the demeanor of the call within the first 5 seconds.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool part about that is, and go back to human psychology, to what I've seen over the years, it's like, not over the years, I mean, I've only been around for like 40 years, not 2,000, about 10,000. But, human behavior oftentimes go back to people are more friendly to folks who are like them, right? Or they might see it from the same camp. It's like when you travel abroad and all of a sudden you see another American. It could be somebody from the backwoods of Appalachia that I never talked to. But the fact that you have American, it's like, oh, yeah, hey, man, how you doing? But I like that because it gives me this, I think it sets the stage. You're not a foe. What's up? And I think this leads into the next component.
Well, and the other thing here, Donald, is you called it out. Like people, they're going to be more friendly to people that are like them or people that know people like them. And the difference between, and so actually a lot of salespeople try to accomplish that with the, how's your day going? Or did I catch you at a bad time? They use this like these false pleasantries, or they try to build this rapport at the interruption. Well, that's just like acting like you care about the other person or you're in their network. Armand is actually showing it with that heard the name toss around opener. Hey, we work with a couple other podcasts like you. And so the data supported this also. We pulled some data with Gong. Did I catch you at a bad time? Had a 2% success rate on cold calls. how's your day going was a little better, and it was like a 7% success rate. The opener that Armand you just used had an 11.5% success rate, which if you think about a career of cold calling is a pretty dramatic difference. Not only because it gets you to the part where you can give your pitch, but also because if you think about the tenor of the call, even if you get to the part of your pitch on, hey, did I catch you at a bad time? They're already looking at you as this like subservient telemarketing type versus they're actually going to be hearing out your pitch if they're like, okay, wait, this person works with peers of mine, or they work with other companies who we share the same investor. And so if you think about the downstream impact of showing them that context rather than acting like you're a really friendly rapport building seller, like big difference.
Yeah. The other part that I like about that, the notion back there again, it also helps me to recognize that you're not like this, it's not like a guinea pig, or you're not, I don't want to make it like a novice in a sense. And I know, they're going to have new people out there, but I want to deal with somebody that can actually solve my problem, that have a relevant problem that I have, than somebody who's just going to, is a seller just trying to just book an appointment. I would be more apt to talk to somebody that I feel has that industry backing or industry expertise.
Yeah, that's right. So another opener that you can use, Donald, if you don't want to use the heard the name tossed around opener, is a variant of that permission-based opener, which is canned, that I call the tailored permission opener. And all you're going to do is you're going to take your normal permission-based opener, and you're going to lead with the thing that made you call them in the first place. The piece of research that you found about them. So that might sound something like, Emma, I just finished reading your press release about the new office opening in Tacoma, and I'm going to be honest, this is a cold call, but it is a well-researched one, and I'm wondering if I can get half a minute to share why that press release had prompted me to call you, and then you can totally hang up on me if it doesn't make sense from there. What I'm doing is, the key is that office opening in Tacoma needs to be something that I can relate to what my product helps with. So when I was selling billing software to law firms, I would look for things like if they had just opened a new office, which would have tax implications, or if they had just won a big case, which would usually mean they were collecting money, which our software could help with, or if they had just opened a new practice group at the law firm, which often led to billing complexity we could help with. And so what I recommend sellers do is look for their top 5 things that they could be their go-tos that they can easily find about their prospects, but then they can relate to what they help with. And so this one tells them, hey, this is a cold call, but it's a well-researched one. And not only am I telling them that, I'm showing them that by having that context of what I found be the first thing that comes out of my mouth. I just finished reading about your office opening, even before I say my name.
So here's the other part to that too, and I know this is one that comes up all the time with sales reps, and sales leaders always push back on it. You mentioned the research aspect of it. Mm-hmm. How important is that in this era of cold outreach, and then to what level? Because it doesn't sound like it was you're not doing a thesis, a doctorate here, but you are doing some kind of gathering some kind of information. Not sound like a buffoon when you do the call. Talk to us about that.
I don't want to sound like a buffoon. So there's a spectrum, and either extreme on that spectrum is wrong. Yeah. The wrong thing to do is, to your point, do a deep dive thesis research where I'm reading Armand's entire biography, listening to every podcast he's ever been on, and spending 15 hours, or frankly, even a good hour plus, researching somebody who, I might call them and they're a total jerk, or they just bought a competitor, or their number's bad, or I've had this before, someone is now deceased and I spent all this time reading their bio. So over-researching is not the right way to do things. The other end of the spectrum would be zero research, and that's actually a bit less because of how you're going to engage on the call, because I think sometimes people over-rotate on personalization rather than relevance. The thing is, and this goes back to what we talked about in the beginning about that gong data, doing a little bit of prep to make sure you're calling the right people at the right time with the right trigger will jack your meeting booked rate and frankly, even your connect rate up really, really high. So if you think about that spectrum, our recommendation is find the top 5 triggers that would make you believe someone could be a good customer. And when you're doing your research, intentionally look for those 5 triggers in order, And when you find one, that's your reason for calling them. You don't need to keep researching. And so you can start to operationalize this stuff and become far more efficient.
Just to add on to that, you know how in football they have this thing called the 2-minute drill, which is you have 2 minutes to score. I break that down into the 1-minute drill, which is you have 1 minute to decide if you want to work the account and also find one thing that you can use in your opener. And the moment you find one of them, stop. So it should only take you 30 seconds to figure out if you want to work an account or not. So you should know, can you work international accounts? Can you work accounts under this many employees? Can you work accounts over this many employees? You have a list of 10 things that disqualify an account. You go bop, 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 bop. You hit them back to back to back to back to back to back to back. 10 things, 30 seconds, boom. You decide to work the account, awesome. Now you have your top 5 list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first one you find, stop. It should take you 30 seconds to disqualify, 30 seconds to research, find one thing. That's what you put in your opener.
You know, and what I've seen is on the other side is where the sellers will literally they jump back and forth, because what I'm hearing from what you're sharing here is obviously your industry expertise or your niche expertise, right? You're not doing like 15 different types of accounts. You're only focusing on your one type of account and going through that, which I think obviously makes total load of sense. I love this, man. This is great. Now I got my opener down. We went ahead and did some examples there, but now I've got an objection. Like you're going to get those, and some people climb up when they get the objection. What are some of your thoughts on objection? Armand, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning. Why don't you lead off with that?
Yeah. So first thing is a lot of people think they need to handle the objections. They need to fight the objection. So Donald, for example, if you say, I'm using a competitor. We're recording this currently on Riverside FM. Let's say that I'm calling from some other recording platform. I'm calling you from Zoom. The moment you say, we use Riverside, try to handle the objection. They try to say all the different reasons why Zoom is better than Riverside. But the problem is, Donald, you're not actually thinking about the trade-offs of whether or not Zoom is better when you give me that objection. You're just throwing the first thing that you can think of to say, I don't want to hear the sales pitch. I've got something. I don't have time for this right now. I'm on Riverside. Peace. And so you're not even a logical reasoning yet. And the reason for that is most objections are not objections to the solution. They're objections to the cold call itself. They're reactions to the interruption. And so you're just going to chuck the first chair you can find at the room to get me out of the room as quickly as possible. And so in order to wake up your brain and take you from reacting to listening, the first thing I need to do when you give me an objection is I need to agree with the objection. So Donald, let's just pretend that you give me that objection. We're using Riverside Inc.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, hey, Donald, I totally get that. You know, honestly, I should have assumed that you were using a great platform. Your guys' separate audio tracks, they sound really, really good already, and you're probably not going to switch. Hey, just so no one from my team cold calls you again, could you give me a sense of, is it that, and at that point, I'm going to ask you a question that gets you talking more about your solution. And so, for example, if I was using Riverside Inc., one of the things that I don't like, or that I'll usually point at, is I'll say, hey, just so I know that it makes sense for no one else to call you, could you give me a sense? I imagine you have some cold call scripts that you've wanted to screen share in the past. How have you guys gone about doing that in the past? And I can hit you with a trap question now that gets you to think about what other solutions might be out there. But I can't do that until I agree with the objection and I incentivize you to give me a little bit more information by saying, hey, just so no team cold calls you again, could you really help me understand why it doesn't make sense for us to call you again?
The piece that Armand added about the agreeing and the incentivizing is really, really important, because what your average salesperson does when they get that objection is they fast forward or they jump right to that trap question that Armand asked. They go right to, okay, how can I beat this competitor? Or how can I get this person to tell me about something they can't do so I can beat the competitor? The problem is that's what most telemarketers do. When they get resistance from their prospect, they turn up the sales pressure. And that only makes your prospect less willing to hear you out or engage you because you're putting yourself in telemarketer camp. Your prospect, they didn't ask to be cold called. You're interrupting them, and now they told you a reason that had some legitimacy for why they wouldn't want to meet with you, and now you're pushing even harder. And that's where I think a lot of salespeople lose the EQ that often makes them good salespeople and why they got into sales in the first place is what Armand's doing is acknowledging like, okay, wait a second. I interrupted this person. They just told me they're on a competitor. They're getting the job done today. Yeah, this one's totally my bad. You probably would have called me if you'd been interested in our solution. Or I should have assumed you'd have something in place. You're a really popular podcast. And when you do that, it brings the sales pressure down. And again, they start to see you as a professional. They start to see you as a peer. You're not someone who's going to just try to ram their product no matter what.
I think we did a little survey, and one of the things we found, like what most people say with salespeople, is that they feel like this, it's almost like a confrontation that they get with a seller, because the seller, if you give the seller, I'm not interested, it's automatically the seller feel like you'd insulted their family line, and it's like I have to show my loyalty to my role and fight back with you. But you almost like, from what you're sharing there, Nick, it was almost, I can see and I can feel the confrontation if I do go to that question, that it's a battle and you're not going to win. You're not ever going to win. And that's where the hang up comes. But I would love what you go back to what you said, Armand. Like, for me, when you brought that up, now I started to think like, it doesn't matter. It's like, it's a cognitive thing, because that's my world right now. It's podcasting, and you're bringing up this question that makes me want to show my level of superiority as an expert. And I'm going to answer that question now. But you just made it a conversation, and I'm like, holy moly, this guy from the opener is somebody that I do have affiliation with, and somehow, and he sounds normal. So maybe I should have a conversation. And he asked an intriguing question. You know what I mean? Am I making sense there?
If there's one thing to that point, Donald, that I think sellers should practice when they're handling objections, is just the moment you get an objection, practice laughing and agreeing with the objection. And
you did that.
That alone, exactly, there you are. That alone, it shows that you're comfortable. When most sellers get hit with not interested, they're like, they start to stammer, stutter, and it comes off like they're a telemarketer. Versus when you laugh and agree, it's like, oh, I guess this one's really not a fit. If you say no budget, I'm going to be like, totally get it, man. Look, honestly, it sucks to buy software today. Like, nowadays, it's hard enough to keep something, let alone it is to buy something new. In your head, you're like, oh my God, finally someone's not going to try to sell me. And now we can have an actual conversation. You can do that basically with any objection in the world.
I mean, there's so much more to this, and I know in the book it goes deeper, but the cool thing, the question that comes with that is like, how do you get a seller to that point? Because you guys have been doing it for a minute. Is that more of like the practice before you make the calls? What's your theory, your thoughts on that side? Or just making a call and mess up enough?
So if we're going to talk about objections solely here, the first is recognizing what Armand called out earlier, which is when you get an objection, more often than not, it has nothing to do with what you're selling or for like your cause. It has everything to do with the interruption. You picked up the phone, and it might have been a good time for you, and this might be your job to make cold calls, but for your prospect, it is an entirely unwelcome interruption to their day. And that's okay. Our job is to start conversations with new prospects. But the first thing to recognize is they're just trying to get you off the phone. They don't want to talk to a telemarketer. And so when you realize that, you'll see, first, your chances of success are higher when you take this approach rather than trying to fight the objection immediately. But second, to your point, Donald, of like, how does somebody actually get good at this? Yeah, the key is practicing. And if I go back to that data that I talked about earlier, average cold caller makes 800 cold calls, that's like calling every day for an hour for an entire month. They talk to 43 people. If you think about the amount of objection handling practice they get off of 43 cold calls over a month, like that's not enough to get really, really good. But if I go for a walk around my neighborhood for 30 minutes and I just practice that agree and laugh, or if I'm trying to get good at my opener, I say my opener again and again and again and again and again, I can get a quarter's worth of cold calling practice in a half-hour walk, and I can get some sunshine, and I can get some steps in, and I'm a generally happier person, and I'm a better seller. And so the key is isolate some of your core talk tracks, the opener you're going to use, the pitch that you're going to use, your agree and laugh in response to objections. And if you can get those components right, you can get to that 75th percentile pretty quickly, because almost every single cold call has an opener, has a pitch, and has an objection that you're going to need to respond to.
Dope. Love it. The last component, you have a strong, staunch feeling relationship on this word, the value prop. Who wants to take this one? Because now as a seller, I got an opener, I know how to handle objection, but I got to say something to grab this person's attention when it comes to what I could do for them. What about the value prop that we need to be aware of?
So, Donald, I have a question for you.
Oh, snap.
If I were to run a dum-dum lollipop under the sink water and drop it on a shag rug and give it to you, would you eat it?
No, man. It's disgusting.
No. Why? What does it look like?
It's nasty. It's dirty. It has
It's
hair
probably got
on
like
it.
hair
It's
hanging.
yeah.
Exactly. You can see the hair coming off of
Yeah.
this thing. And so I immediately created a picture of a problem and an emotional, visceral reaction out of you. And I did that by doing things like explaining the scenery, giving you an idea of specific objects or things where it's like, here's the dum-dum lollipop under the water with the shag rug. I'm telling you the story of the trigger problem to create a visceral reaction. And then, if I told you, well, here you go, man, I have a cleanly wrapped dum-dum lollipop, and I knew you really wanted one, you'd take the damn lollipop, because now the solution has context, right?
Yeah.
The problem is most sellers lead with solutions that mean absolutely nothing to a prospect whatsoever. They'll say things like, my solution's a single source of truth, an all-in-one platform, a single pane of glass. Number one, everyone's using those things, which immediately recategorizes you as a telemarketer. But then number two, don't actually mean anything to a prospect. No one knows what a single source of truth for compensation management. The only way that you can actually get a prospect to listen to a pitch, given how desensitized they are to these pitches, is to pinpoint a problem or talk about a problem so specifically in their day that literally they get triggered by it and they sit up. So for example, we're on this platform, Riverside here again, our favorite podcast recording platform. For those of you listening, you might not be familiar with this problem. When you start clicking record on Riverside, it starts recording on separate video and audio tracks local to your hard drive. What that means is it prioritizes the download on your computer over your connection with the different people on the call. And what happens is everyone's face gets really, really grainy, so it looks like we're talking to each other in a 1993 movie before they had HD TVs. And so if I lead with that, Donald, and I say, like, typically when I'm talking to people who are using Riverside, they love a lot of the fact that it can record on separate audio tracks, but they can't stand it when they literally can't see their host's facial expressions anymore because they look like a movie from 1972. That gets you to sit up, and you might even laugh a little bit because you're like, holy shit, that guy knows my business. And then all I have to do, Donald, is I need to say one sentence that makes the problem go away. So I might say, Podcast Recording Platform Inc. records both in the cloud, but then also to your devices at the same time, so you never have to deal with podcast graininess again. I don't even need to explain much about my solution if I nail the triggering problem correct first, and then I'm just going to ask you, Donald, are you open to learning more? That's a problem prop over a value prop.
Dang, come on, man. It's this, like, I love it. So here's the other part to that I find is really fascinating with the problem prop is going back to the studies that show that 65 to 70, about 65% of the human population are visual people, and we know from, like, if you're speaking from stage or whatnot, the storytelling aspect where you just put in your head everything you say. One, I visualized it, but then I go back to what you're verifying. It makes me since it's like a storytelling mode, it makes me docile, so to speak, because now I'm listening to everything that you're saying. And like you verified, it does put you in this different echelon where I do see you as this expert and you do understand that problem. Oftentimes I find that people who understand a problem better than me, I will relinquish my time to them because I feel they're not, like you said, that's subservient. They're bringing something to me that I don't know. And it's a strategy that I found to be very effective in so many different walks of life when you can come as, tell me about a problem better than I can articulate it, then I decipher that you're going to be more of an expert at it than me. You know, am I making sense there?
100%.
Yeah.
If you can describe the problem in extremely dangerous specificity, not only does it get them to sit up, there's no way you could be a complete rando by being able to describe the problem that well. When you're able to describe a problem in their situation so specifically, so accurately, it shows that you get their business. And that's the best way to get them to listen to you, is you establish your credibility as a peer by showing them that you understand what it looks like to live in their shoes, not understand what it looks like to copy paste your product marketer's pitch language.
No offense to you product marketing people.
Love our PMs,
like your
but
stuff.
you know, single source of truth.
Well, this is great. I mean, I want to go back to, just wrap all this stuff up. All this stuff can be found in your book. Can you talk to us a little bit more about this, why you guys decided to write a book right now, and then how we can get a hold of that?
What's funny is there are so many sellers today who are going through a second phase of transition where the first phase of transition was I can send 1 million emails a mile using all these automated sequences, and now the problem is everyone can do that. Literally, a prospect's inbox is flooded with 10,000 emails every single day. People actually rotate email inboxes where they send 25 emails per day out of 20 different inboxes because you literally get spam blocked if you send any more than that. So the bar for email has gotten so low because it's so easy for everyone to do it. And so you see a lot of these teams that are like, shoot, the only way I can get out in front of all these other sellers is by picking up the phone. And folks, there is an awesome opportunity right now where the average cold caller today still really sucks, especially because all they've been doing is sending cold emails. And so we broke down every single step of the cold call, step by step, throughout our book, Cold Calling Sucks, and That's Why It Works. Tracks for every single step of the cold call, and there are even QR codes sprinkled throughout the book that contain voiceovers, so you can literally hear the tone throughout the book, so you know exactly how you should sound as well. And so if you want to go check it out, folks, you can go get that at 30mpc.com/book.
Done. We'll put that in our show notes. And amazing podcast you guys have too, so we have a link down in the show notes so folks can get access to that as well. Appreciate you guys coming on the show today, giving us some good wisdom, giving us some good guidance. We understand how to do our openers. We know how to do an objection. And then we understand that we need to drop the value and go for problems. So appreciate you guys, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having us. It's a lot of fun.
That was Nick and Armand. Both of them have been highly successful in their sales career, not only as individual contributors, but also as sales leaders and also as guides, helping you and me to be able to learn how we can improve our game. The book is fabulous, and I highly recommend you check it out. There's a link down in the show notes, and you can also check out their podcast, 30 Minutes to President Club. I want you to thrive and succeed. I want to help you as much as possible, and that's why we bring on guests like this who have amazing insights, strategies, tactical things that you can use. Apply them and tell us how it worked for you. You can find us on LinkedIn. Also, you can go to thesalesevangelist.com, learn about some of our upcoming training programs, as well as our communities. As always, I want you to thrive. I want you to succeed. I want you to go out, raise your level of thinking, do big things, and make some money in the process. See you on the next one.